And this afternoon, we want to look at agricultural technology for resilience, focusing on frameworks and practice. I think the issue of technology came up through in different presentations this morning, and we want to deep dive into that. Basically to look at how is the framework structured for technology transfer in Africa, focusing mainly on emerging technologies. We are privileged this afternoon to have very able experts in this area who will be supported by also experts in different fields on technology and governance. And we hope that we can also interact with them at the end of their presentation. This is how we're structured. So we are going to have two presentations. The first one is going to be by Dr. Nangayo on emerging technologies and frameworks and governance system in Africa. And then we're going to have another presentation by Dr. Sylvester Oike on development of drought tego, again from AATF. Allow me to read to you the bios of our experts. I will start with Dr. Nangayo, who is going to take the first presentation. Dr. Nangayo is an applied ecologist and a leading expert on biosafety and regulatory affairs. He holds a BSc degree in biological sciences from University of Nairobi, Kenya, and a MSc degree in environmental biology from University of Guelph, Canada, and a PhD degree in applied ecology from Imperial College, University of London. Additionally, he holds a postgraduate diploma in crop protection from Imperial College, London. His career as a scientist began at the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, KARO, where he worked for close to 20 years, rising through the ranks of research officer, senior research officer, principal research officer, and deputy director of biotechnology research in Nairobi. He is responsible for securing regulatory approval, authorization for testing, and deployment of agricultural technologies, including ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements of target countries for AATF projects. Francis is a member of many professional societies, including Entomological Society of Kenya, the African Crop Science Society, the African Association of Insect Scientists, the Public Research and Regulation Forum, the African Biotechnology Stakeholders Forum, and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa COMESA expert panel on biotechnology and biosafety. Previously, Francis served as a member of the Kenya Standing Technical Committee on Imports and Exports, the National Biosafety Committee, NBC, of Kenya, the Institutional Biosafety Committee of KARO, and the Executive Committee of the Inter-African Physiosafety Council of the African Union. And Francis comes from Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Francis, who is going to give us our first presentation this afternoon. Francis, you have the floor.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, organizers, for inviting AATF, let me say welcoming AATF to participate in this policy dialogue forum that speaks to the subject of climate smart agriculture, which, as we were told in the morning, is a matter that speaks directly to the problem of the moment, and that is not climate change, but climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. In my presentation today, which will be about emerging systems, emerging technologies, and governance systems for the same, I will take the liberty to remind us about the diversity of emerging tools and applications available. Some very exciting because already some are being harnessed to deal with the subject of climate change adaptation. But some, their use is yet to be completely harnessed, and that raises some concerns, which is the reason why regulation of such technologies then becomes very, very important. And I'll then, in that regard, talk about regulations of modern technologies. And from my background, I will be comfortable talking about regulation of modern biotechnology applications, speaking directly to the subject of genetic modification and genome editing, particularly how those two applications are regulated globally, but with a special focus on how we are regulating this in Africa before I make my concluding remarks. Next. There are so many emerging technologies, and the screenshot I picked from the web here just shows some that you may already be familiar with. You will see applications like artificial intelligence and machine learning. You will see applications like the use of robotics and many, many others. But I did mention that I will not lecture you on emerging technologies per se. I will just narrow my presentation on the field of biotechnology and not talk about biotechnology as such, but how biotechnology is regulated, because I was invited here to talk about governance systems, which is regulation, so to speak. And as I already highlighted, I will keep those two sub-subjects of genetic engineering and genome editing as the main focus of my presentation. Next slide. I want to talk about genetic engineering very briefly as an extension of an age-old subject that we know called genetics. And I'm saying genetics is an old subject because we know this. We know this from vivid accounts of our ancestors who, when they got fed up with the job of hunting and gathering, they made some innovation to pioneer selection and crossing of plants and animals, and hence that marked the beginning of the subject of genetics. Those of you familiar in plant breeding may know that in the late 18th century, the work of Gregor Mendel did give structured perspectives on this subject of heredity and inheritance. And fast forward into the mid-40s and the mid-50s, scientists at the time had already narrowed down and characterized the nature of DNA as a genetic blueprint, and going even further to characterize it as a double helix structure, the iconic double helix twisted ladder that we all know about. And in the mid-60s, scientists discovered that naturally enzymes exist that can cut DNA at specific sites. And there are also enzymes that can also repair that DNA called ligases. And that is what stimulated interest in genetic engineering. And in 1972, scientists celebrated successful cloning of DNA from one microorganism to another. And while this was exciting, some said, wait a minute, if we are going to move genes like this, we better know the consequences. And I think they were alluding to the need to move within regulatory safeguards. Much later, of course, the utilitarian part of cutting DNA and moving it here was harnessed into production of insulin that is now commercially available, synthetically produced, and this helps in the field of health science. In parallel, plant scientists by the early 1980s had perfected the art and science of developing genetically modified crops, which are now commercialized and cultivated, even in this country where we are. The rest is a story for another day. Now, I want to flip the story and then talk about when did the regulation of genetic engineering actually begin. If you go to the next slide. And it all started around 1972, where I said a team of scientists had been able to clone a DNA fragment from a bacterial cell from a viral DNA fragment cloned into bacteria. And scientists then got concerned that even as we explore this field that enables moving of genes across species, we better know the health implications. And meetings were then held one after another. The famous meeting took place in beachside town of in Davis, California, in 1975, that helped build consensus on how to regulate genetic modification. And that became then the foundation of developing guidelines for regulating genetically modified plants or organisms in the US. Elsewhere, OECD countries were concerned about this, and in 1983 they set up an ad hoc committee of experts to see how to develop guidelines. And it's a team that worked very well, because only 3 years later, in 1986, they published what became the OECD Blue Book on recombinant DNA safety considerations. I've talked about how this emerged in the US and how this was also emerging in other OECD countries. Africa is not in picture yet. And I want to say that in the rest of the developing world, including Africa, interest on regulating genetic modification is linked to a meeting that took place in Rio in 1992, which we know also it gave impetus to developing or discussions around having an international framework for regulating the movement of living modified organisms, which culminated in the passage of what is known as the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. And that protocol was adopted in the year 2000. And I want to then say that when it comes to genetic engineering, in many developing countries and in virtually all African countries, this is linked, let's go to the next slide, this is linked to this Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. This was the major influencer of the kind of governance system we have for genetically modified organisms. So the protocol is about contributing to ensuring adequate level of protection in the field of safe transfer, handling, and use of living modified organisms. Another driving force that influenced the nature of regulatory systems we have for GM technology in Africa is an outcome of a project that was commissioned by Africa Union in around 2002 to develop what was called the African Model Law on Biosafety. I think at that time, the feeling was that many African countries had not developed frameworks for regulating genetically engineered products. And the African Union must have felt a duty of care in considering to develop a model law that member states could default to if they wanted. And both the Cartagena Protocol and the Africa Model Law emphasize the principle of precaution. In fact, the African Model Law emphasized precautionary principle in the extreme sense. But what do we mean by this precautionary principle? If you go to the next slide, precautionary principle is a governing principle in environmental management that advocates for demonstration of full scientific certainty before you can allow certain actions to take place. I have put the word full scientific certainty so that we can pause and think about it. When we were invited to come here, a team of my colleagues from AATF, if we wanted full scientific certainty that we would travel by car and then fly in a plane safely and come here, of course that evidence would not come, so we would not have come. So the precautionary principle sometimes puts certain expectations too high, and it is like assuring yourself that if you have a bicycle and you happen to live in a society where there are people who steal, the only way you can be sure that the bicycle is safe is to padlock it and padlock it and padlock it again and again, then padlock, and continue like that. Then you'll be assured that there is perhaps full scientific certainty that then it will not be stolen. I'm just putting this anecdote here to emphasize that because of such principles of full scientific certainty, we have ended up with regulatory systems that are perhaps too protective. And if we move to the next slide, let me say that with the time, then African countries moved on to develop what we call national biosafety frameworks by putting in place policies on biotechnology, then matching these with legislation. In many countries, this is called the Biosafety Act or Biosafety Decree or GMO Act in this country. And then establishing institutional mechanisms for enforcing the laws and a mechanism for engaging the public in this process. And when you set up these four components, you can perhaps relax and say, well, we have put what, in our view, amounts to a national biosafety framework. But I want to add that there is always the hidden element called political goodwill and public acceptance that must also align with all these for this kind of governance system to work. And having said that, I want to say, if you go to the next slide, that getting a national biosafety system in place has never been easy. One would expect that you set up the four components I have indicated, and then with the political goodwill and public acceptance, you would desire to be at the dark green corner there. That means you have a fully developed framework that is also functioning. So to get there, there are a number of countries that have tried to get there, and they are still on the arrow that is far left. There are others that have walked a winding road, gotten there, and again maybe dropped off. And I come from Kenya. At one time, we had all those four components in Kenya. But the government at the time, again, disregarding perhaps their own policies and laws, again came up with something called a cabinet ban on GMO, and meaning that you are at the desired place and again you drop off. But thankfully, we have a new administration that is trying to work things back to where we ought to be. So having said this, let me then now just show how national biosafety frameworks for GM technology has evolved. I know I'm running out of time, but I have just 2 slides to do that. If we go to the next slide. Yes. 20 years ago, if you talked about a country having a governance system on GM technology, you would perhaps only count South Africa. And maybe that time Egypt was moving in the right direction. Egypt had a system that was nearly there. Then 10 years later, we tracked this, and we could see about half a dozen countries were dark green, meaning that they were having functioning systems. There were others that were still yellow, meaning work in progress. But I want to emphasize that there are some that had taken the precautionary principle that I have explained much earlier. And they had developed laws that were so prohibitive, and those countries have indicated them appearing red there. And then about 2 years ago, when we did our audit, we saw that some had relaxed, especially Ethiopia had changed, and Tanzania also had moved to a progressive path towards regulating GM technology. But that's where we are. Let me wind up. I have just 1 slide on genome editing, which is considered an extension. Let's go to the next slide. An extension of genetic engineering, but getting to be done in a more precise way. And the discoverers of this mechanism of doing genome editing is a couple of 2 ladies there who got a Nobel Prize 2 years ago. But this is not to say that the genome editing and genetic engineering are the same. In fact, it has become a polarizing subject. If you go to the very last slide, it's a polarizing subject where in the European Union, the thinking is that genome editing and genetic engineering are the same, and the court ruling in 2018 just went on to ratify that. That decision may be affecting what is happening in other parts, like perhaps influencing what could also be happening here, but I'm not sure. But we have countries like Nigeria and Kenya that have distinguished genetic modification from genetic engineering, and so on and so forth. But I've run out of time. Thank you very much for listening to me. The rest I can respond to in the QA.
Thank you so much, Francis, for giving us a history of biotechnology from where it started and where we are. And listening to you, I remembered 1 quote, and I just want to read it. It says, in as far as GMO or emerging technologies are concerned, in the US, products are safe until they're proven risky. In France, products are risky until proven safe. In India, products are risky even when proven safe. Africa, products are risky even when they don't exist. So with that, allow me to invite our second speaker, Dr. Oike. And Dr. Oike has more than 18 years of interdisciplinary experience in research and development projects of natural resources and crop management and plant nutrition. He joined ATF from the Africa Rice Center, Warda, where he worked for 5 years, rising to the position of a principal scientist, soil fertility agronomist, and project leader. Sylvester attained his doctorate in soil science, specializing in soil fertility and plant nutrition from the Ahmadu Bello University, Nigeria, in 1996. In 2001, he was a postdoctoral fellow at Cornell University, in plant, soil, and nutrition lab at Ithaca. He obtained a master's degree in crop science from the University of Nigeria, the same university from where he had graduated with a bachelor's of agriculture degree in horticulture. Sylvester holds a postgraduate diploma in irrigation engineering from the Center of Irrigation Engineering at Catholic University in Belgium. Besides research, he has lectured in Nigeria at the University of Benin on soil science and Anambra State College of Education on crop production, horticulture, agriculture economics. Sylvester is a national of Nigeria. Allow me to invite Sylvester, who is going to talk to us about how the framework that Francis talked about is actually being implemented in practice and some of the products coming out of that framework. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm glad that you are hearing me because, we just finished eating. What I don't like is to give a talk just after lunch. But my voice is so loud that when I talk, you have to wake up, whether you are slumbering. So let me just quickly talk about this, how the framework has helped us, and then the challenges. I'm going to talk on behalf of several organizations. We are being supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the US. We'll talk about how we went through developing climate smart maize. I hope this thing can change. No, I would have liked to really control it myself. Unfortunately, I can't. So next slide. I can't control it myself. Okay, so let me rely on assistance. Now, anytime you hear the word GMO, you know what happens? Debate. And it's very common in Africa. There are debate. Is it safe? It's not safe. Is it safe? It's not safe. But I want to, if you don't take any message from me today, take the message that any GMO crop or animal that has been approved, has been evaluated, approved, is safe for human consumption, for animal and for the environment. Please, next slide. That is the statement by well-known organization world over. Please go with that message. The argument we are arguing in Africa, let it stop. Please. Because we are arguing, the same people who are supporting us to argue are the same one who are eating this technology. They are using the technology. They are feeding from the product of the technology, but they are not growing. But we need to grow it in Africa. And why do we need to grow it? Please, next slide. A third of our population in Africa depend on maize. Am I lying or not? Southern Africa, a country like Malawi, can they stay without eating maize? No. But maize is the most sensitive crop when it comes to drought. We've been talking about climate change. Now, there's also the pest, like stem borer. When we started many years ago, 2008, we were focusing on stem borer. But one serious bug, they call it 4-army worm, came all the way from the Americas in 2016 and has come to live. It has refused to go. If you are a farmer and you grow maize and you have not experienced this bug called 4-army worm, then you are not worth being called a maize farmer. If you go to Kenya, you go to everywhere in Africa now, our maize production, when it has no maize to feed, it starts feeding on any other crop available. Africa is losing so much money, 2.5 to about 5 billion annually because of this pest. We say, let us address this twin problem of drought and pest. Next. So we formed this partnership. It started as Water Efficient Maize for Africa in 2008. In 2018, we changed the name to Tela Maize Project. When we started in 5 countries, Kenya, Mozambique, South Africa, Ethiopia, and South Africa and Tanzania, Uganda. Ethiopia saw the product and joined us in 2017. Nigeria also heard about it. They wept and they shouted and said they must be part of this partnership. They joined in 2019. And the other partner in the breeding program is the CIMIT, which we all know, the Maize, International Maize and Wheat Improvement Program. We have our private sector organization, Bayer, that graciously donated to us. There are 700 maize type, they call it germplasm, from different parts of the globe. They gave it, put it on table. They also gave us their drought-tolerant gene or trait, which I will talk about. There are 2 insect protection traits. There are regulatory data to support because of what he said that it is highly regulated product. They gave it to us. We are a foremost African technology transfer organization. We are coordinating. Please, next slide. Now, when we started, we said, what is the best approach to develop maize? Please, anyone who has it, we assemble all the various approaches. We say we are going to use conventional breeding, facilitated with what they call marker-assisted breeding. I won't go into those jargons explaining. And then we do the genetic engineering. That is, what we are saying is, as other parts of the world, let our African farmers have options. If you want to go conventional, go conventional. If you want to go transgenic, that's the GM he was talking about, go transgenic. So we did breeding for the conventional, made them drought tolerant. We released across the project country 124, which we call drought tego. Tego simply means a Latin word which means shield. Maize that is shielded from drought. Now we said, okay, this maize is shielded from drought. Can we further enhance it through genetic engineering that he mentioned about, using a protein which they call co-shock protein, is from soil microorganism called Bacillus, which is Bacillus subtilis. It is used for almost a century. If you have been to Japan, you hear the word natto. It's for fermented soybean. In Nigeria, we also use it to make condiments for cooking. It's safe. Then we said, okay, when we have enhanced it just by only 10%, we can now protect with insect protection trait, which is the BT from Bacillus thuringiensis. This BT is used in the horticultural industry, in organic farming. They spray, but scientists say instead of spraying, let's put it into the plant so that the plant can protect itself without you intervening spraying. This is what we are talking about. Now, quickly, next one. So, I talked about drought tego. I just want to show you some of the results that are there from from their performance. Quickly, please. Next. So, we evaluated the drought tego materials in 17 maize growing county in Kenya. Within that period, 2.5 years, we saw yield of farmers. Can you imagine the number of farmers there? 4,800 farmers. Yield increasing by 53%. That is a crop we saw in February. A seed company was, because of the interest by farmers, was in producing seed, 300 metric tons of seed to sell to smallholder farmers in Kenya. Please, quickly. Now, here, in developing this product, we did it with the farmers. We involved them in the development. Look at farmers evaluating the product on their field. Please, next one, quickly. There are lots of pictures in here just to be able to carry us along. So we said, okay, let us see the impact of this product. We got external people to do an impact assessment of the drought tego. And farmers told us that why they prefer this drought tego compared with their other variety is that it copes with drought much better. And most importantly, they say they prefer it because it has drooping ears. You can see the ear. When it matures, it turns down and birds won't go in there. And in addition, rain won't enter. Then they also say that when it's ready for harvest, the green material, they can feed it to animals. They call it stay green phenomenon. Quickly, let me just move from there. So we talk about the transgenic. Now, where I'm saying that among these top best drought-tolerant material, we are enhancing them to make them more drought-tolerant and protecting them against insect. So that's what I'm going to talk now. Those products we call teller. Teller was derived from the word tutela, Latin word which means protection. So in doing transgenic work, the first two boxes you see there, under normal circumstances in breeding, farmers, we don't do that. Breeders don't do that. They just do their materials and then go to what they call national performance trial for variety certification. When it's satisfied, it's released and seed company produce it. But because of that fear that everyone has about the safety, they introduce what they call confined field trial. These are regulated trials that nothing must be taken out of the field. Everything must be handled there and buried there until you have proven that they are safe to human, they are safe to animals, they are safe to environment. You produce a dossier up to 140 pages, dossier thesis, all on safety of this product. And along this chain, it's only when they give you approval that you can take them out to go into variety certification. So it takes years. So that's why I say any product, GM product that is approved for consumption, consider it safe. All this argument we are doing, please, let's forget about it. Next. So we said, okay, now we have this product. They are first bred as conventional products. We inserted the two genes now, the protein that I mentioned, the BT and the co-shock protein. We said, now let's evaluate them. Are they efficacious? Do they work when we put them in our own adapted germplasm? This is the trial I want to go. I won't be able to give you the full cocktail of the result, but I will just showcase some to see. Please, next slide. Now, you see, across 6 locations, 12 confined field trial for 5 years in all those countries, we found an average 43% yield advantage. But what does it mean? Is this fertilizer that increases yield? No. What it means is this. If I am a farmer, he is a farmer, we have adjacent field, we have the same quantity of seed, fertilizer, everything. The difference between his and mine is that he's a progressive farmer, he plants the GM product. I am a non-progressive farmer. I say, no, I will go with the conventional. If I grow the conventional, he grows this, what happens? He gets 143 bags where I get 100 bags. That's what it means. What happened to my 43 bags? My 43 bags is eaten by the pests. My crop will look like that one in the extreme. His will look very green. You know what I will do if I'm in the village? I will accuse him of witchcraft. You are laughing, but it happened here in South Africa. Kingston can witness it. I will show you an article when we go. Please go next. Quickly, please. So this is what the crop looks like. If you are a farmer, would you like to grow the one in the middle? When you can grow that clean one there. That is the technology we are talking about. Do they look different? This one is GM, that one is non-GM. Is there a difference? If I take you to the field and I show you, if I don't tell you this is drought tolerant, this is non, you will never know the difference. It's just an approach that scientists have come across on how to develop and make our life much easier for us. It's safer. I'll show you some more pictures. Please, quickly. Now, he talked about how windy the road is. When you get an approval that takes you the product out of confined field trial, it's like winning a lottery. You can see me there celebrating. That was in Nigeria. Within a record of 3 months, they gave approval. In some other country, you do it for almost 10 years. You don't get an approval. You are stuck. That's what he was mentioning. Quick, please. Now, so, can you see that picture there? This is a material that has been developed. Here in South Africa, the farmers are growing this product since 2016. Now, look at the one to your extreme right, the green one, looking green. Do you see what it's like? The other one is eaten by pests, isn't it? It looks small. See the yield difference 6 times. You can read more about this article. It's not witchcraft. It is Tego. This is a true story. Who saved this guy from being lynched by his community, the farmer, is Kingston. Please, Kingston, stand up, let them look at you. What we are talking is not a strange technology. Look at them breeding it. He was the one who saved the guy because he was going to be lynched. He got sample of seed from Kingston in a field day and went and tried it in his community. Fall army worm came. The crop was ravaged. Every field was eaten. This guy's crop was growing. And what happened? They say it used witchcraft to destroy their crop. How come he's the only one in the village who has good maize? That is what the technology can do. Next one, please. In Kenya, after we have proven that it works, we said, okay, this variety that we work, 5 of them that were developed, they are BT product. We gave them to the independent organization, the seed certifying agency. You evaluate yourself. They evaluated and identified 3 varieties. You can see the difference. The best check, that is what we are consuming in Kenya. And look at what we can consume. Do you see the yield difference? 2 tons. Do you see the quality of grains? But what is happening in Kenya? Since 2021, we had this approved, and we've not gotten final approval to commercialize. Why? We are still busy arguing. The new government came in. I know it's almost time. The new government came in and removed the ban. After removing the ban, as I talk to you, we have cases in court, up to 5 of them. What are they saying? Why did the government remove the ban? The government removed the ban so that they can use this technology to address food security. What is happening? Where are these NGOs coming from? You ask me, I can answer it. Please, next one. So, challenges. We have this prolonged delay, which is talked about in receiving environmental release and variety release. And there is increased anti-GM advocacy. They are out there to make sure that African farmers do not benefit from this technology. But those who are sponsoring them, they are eating the technology, they are not growing. Who is fooling who? African, we must rise up. And I conclude. with, please, next one. That strategic combination of conventional breeding has led us to develop drought-tolerant Trego material and drought-tolerant teller materials. However, please go with this message. GM products are safe if they have been proven and certified. But we must go, African government must wake up. We should embrace biotechnology among other technologies, not leaving one. Any technology that is there, bring it to the level of farmer. Let the farmer be the judge, not we scientists, not you policymakers. Please. And let them tell them, urgently, we need to address the negative impact of NGOs that are opposing GMO in Africa. We need to address this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Oike, for taking us through a very spirited presentation. I think I liked the 3 points: the involvement of African in solving Africans' problems, so the use of African scientists, and this is a question of choice. So let's make all the tools available for farmers and let them choose on their own. We're transitioning now to roundtable speakers who are going to react to the 2 keynote speakers. And allow me at this point to invite Dr. Macarius Mdeu, Senior Lecturer from Ad University, Tanzania. Sir, you may introduce yourself so that I don't mischaracterize you, but also it's a question of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So my name is spoken, Macarius Mdeu. I work for Arid University, Tanzania, as a senior lecturer. But I've been part of the TISA research program for the last almost 10 years now. And I'm still there. Hopefully, I'll continue to be there if the project continue to exist. My presentation is building upon previous speakers, particularly Professor Jamie, who spoke about the use of the tools in managing irrigation water management. Next slide. Yeah, so when we started the project way back 2013, we had two specific objectives which we are focusing on the tools. So the first one was about developing, testing, but also deploying. And the development part was done by Professor Richard Stiziker, who is now managing the VIA project. And then the second part was about the innovation platforms. And as you heard in the morning that we used these two approach, and we consider them as a two-pronged approach. In the second phase, from 2017, so we still had the two aspects, the tools, but also the innovation platforms, but the focus was much more on upscaling. But I'll be talking much more on the first part, but also focusing the two schemes that we initially started to work. Next slide. Yeah, so this is, you have seen the pictures of the tools. So for the case of Tanzania, so we first had the first tool installed in one of the scheme way back 2014. And as you can see, the second picture from left, so that was the early reader of the chameleon sensors that we had. Technology has transitioned on the tools, and now Richard is talking about card readers. So you don't need the reader as it is now, but just a small card to connect it to the sensors. In 2017, when we started the second phase, so we expanded it to other schemes, and for the case of Tanzania, so we added 5 schemes where we installed the tools. Next slide. Yeah, so by 2021, so the target was, which we had, was to have about 388 tools installed. And by then, about 86 tools had been installed with the small-scale irrigators. But along the way, as a part of engaging the farmers with these tools, we did several training with the farmers themselves, representatives from government agencies, the extension officers, and the total, more or less total participants that participated in this training were about 250. So the issue here is not about maybe, of course, providing the tools to the farmers, and the farmers being able to learn how to use the tools and then adopt how they manage the water, the irrigation water, but also the fertilizers based on what they observe. But on the other part is the training that goes to the agricultural officers that supports these farmers, but also the government agencies that they need to make decisions on these tools, especially on issues of that relates to upscaling. Next. Yeah, and then the second part, which also has already explained in the morning, was the innovation platform. And this slide just illustrates the steps that we went through to establish the innovation platforms. in the areas that we were working. Of course, in the second phase, we moved towards also putting up the district platform that brings together a number of irrigation schemes to work at a district level. Next slide, please. Yeah, so once the innovation platforms are established, so there is need to have a continued engagement. So the stakeholders within this platform continue to meet, to engage, and in the process, they still identify some problems, some challenges, but also opportunities. But also they are able to set and also evaluate some new strategies which they need to engage, and those strategies will take them to where they needed to be, or what they need to achieve. And in the process, so the knowledge and exchange continues to grow as this engagement takes place. But also they need to have a participatory to monitor the process, but also evaluate. So this slide is based on a paper that our colleague Van Ruyen led in a publication. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we had a number of changes which took place as a result of these two interventions. And these are some of the changes which I'm sharing. So we had the changes that were connected with the management of irrigation water, but also the nutrient of fertilizers. And this happens in the schemes that were able to have these tools. But also there are changes that came along as a part of the agriculture innovation platform. And as we saw in the morning in Jamia presentation, so in terms of water, irrigation water, so in these schemes that we have worked, they were able to cut down the number of irrigation frequencies, but also they were able to save the time that they use to irrigate. And along that, then they are able also to reduce the amount of fertilizer that they actually were using to more than half, and that also, which means reduce the amount of nutrient or fertilizer which is washed or leached down as a result of irrigation. Pardon? How many more slides? Okay, maybe I can go quick. Yeah, so quite a number of changes, but also the conflict were reduced over use of water. But also we saw changes that pointed to increased incomes among the household. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is you saw in the morning, which illustrates the drivers for the changes. On the one loop, you have the changes which were linked to the tools, but also the second loop, which were connected to the innovation platform. This is based on a scheme in Zimbabwe, Silalachani, but most of these, what you see, also happened in schemes that we have worked in Tanzania and Zimbabwe, in Tanzania and Mozambique as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is again is coming from our colleague Van Ruyen, which is trying to highlight the resilience elements of these interventions. So you have on the first, which is the left-hand side picture, which illustrates the process which goes on innovation platform, and there's a lot of learning that happens in the process. And so it's not only about maybe being able to identify problems and opportunities, but also to learn the new ways and methods that they need to engage in order to attain the target. But the second one is the tools, the technology, which was developed and engaged. But again, there were a lot of training and learning, but also farmers being able to adapt the different ways and change how do they irrigate, make decision on irrigation, which contributed to cutting down the amount of water that they use, but also the fertilizers. And then considering that the farmers are able to, for example, to have better inputs, but also access market, then these interventions contributed to improved incomes and also livelihood. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. Yeah, so I just tried to link a little bit with the governance, and I'm not going into details, but was trying to look at the policies and strategies that we have, the extent to which they highlight about these kind of simple technologies which are very relevant to the farmers. And you see there's some mentions, but not very explicit. And when you move into, for example, the actions, then you don't see the action. But that does not mean, that farmers or entrepreneurs are not dealing with these kind of simple tools. They are, but perhaps not in a very, I would say, structured and regulated way. Next slide. Yeah, so this is my last presentation, and so what we have found is that when you intervene the two approaches, meaning that the technology, the tools, but also the AIP, then it has demonstrated to contribute to self-sustaining systems. And you have better outcomes when the two are intervened together. And as far as I would say the policies or the framework, then we think that an emphasis on actionable intervention in policies, but also strategies, will allow, these kind of tools to be accessible, so that more farmers can actually be able to benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mderu, and it was indeed a good presentation. I liked your focus on results, especially the sustainability bit. I think all of us need to be working towards sustainability of our actions. The role of farmers, if we're doing it for farmers, we need to find ways of how to involve farmers meaningfully in our projects, in our intervention, but also the policy recommendations on what we can do going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not doing very well on time, and I know that you may want to ask questions at the end of the day, and it appears that the onus is on us. May we have our presentation, the next presentation, each one of us in 5 minutes if we can, so that we have more time for discussions. So with those remarks, allow me to invite Wilson to speak to us, and you can also introduce yourself.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilson, and I am coming from Mozambique, and I work at the National Institute of Irrigation. So I think I'll be as quick as possible. So I'll focus on the smart water tools. This is the outline of my presentation. We can go to the location. So this is just a way to show where we are working. This is just an example of the irrigation schemes where we work. And one of the things that Dr. Makari here said, that the approach we took on those irrigation schemes was not only about the tools, but also we added the AIP, which is the Agriculture Innovation Platform. But at some point, we also added another approach, which is the participatory mapping, which was a way for us to engage with farmers, understand the irrigation scheme, and identifying the problems that they are facing. Next slide, please. So the challenge we have identified are these bad agricultural practices, and which result in low yields, household incomes, lack of good inputs. So I think at some point this is what we face in most of Mozambique, especially in irrigation schemes. So the idea was what we can do with the approaches that we are bringing with the project to solve some of these issues. Next slide, please. So what we are bringing the tools and also these approaches, the AIP, the mapping. So this is just an example to show the tools. At the bottom we see some cabbage there, and then we have buried in the soil some waiting from the detectors. So the idea was based on the colors of the chameleon, which is the tool that we are using. Farmers can take decision about when to irrigate and when to stop the irrigation. So next slide, please. So this is just some of the impacts of the project. This is data just from one irrigation scheme, in this case, Vincent stem irrigation schemes. This is the uptake accumulated learning over this, let's say, 10 years working in these irrigation schemes. And we can see the adoption of the tools and the approaches on those irrigation schemes can go now up to 80% of the farmers. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we are bringing also some of the good benefits. One of the characteristics of those irrigation schemes where we are working is those farmers, to irrigate, they have to buy fuel to pump their motor pump to irrigate. So one of the things of the impact is with the tools, they've managed to control how often they irrigate. And because of that, most of them reduced the number or the frequency of irrigation, and as a result, they reduce the amount of money they spend to buy fuel. And this was actually one of the first impacts that we noticed on those irrigation schemes. And also because of that, they also reduced time they spend on that activities that they took. They used that time to do other activities. Next slide, please. So this is just to show the days now they take to irrigate. We started, for example, we had the farmers that used to irrigate every 7 days, 8 days, 9 days. Now there are farmers that are taking 2 weeks to irrigate their farm. Next slide, please. This is just another example to show some of the yields of green maize. This is fresh maize, it's not the grain, which is in some way very profitable. So most of the farmers, especially during the rain season, they start to produce grain maize. And this is just to show where we started, 5 tons, and now we have on average farmers ranging between 10 to 12 tons per hectare. Next slide, please. So this is just to show some other project impacts. I think in the morning some of the issues that we had, and Dr. Pitok shared, is most of our irrigation schemes are not well maintained. And with the tools, we've started to notice that there is a lot of water that are being lost in the canals. So with the AIP, we've decided to bring farmers to start together and start cleaning those canals, do some more activity to maintain the irrigation schemes, and this in some way have helped to better manage the irrigation schemes. And also, I don't know if you know, but Mozambique farmers don't pay for water. So it's kind of a challenge when you say become more sustainable for the water you use. And one of the exercises we also did was trying to work with the farmers to see their willingness to pay for water, to calculate how much they would pay. And now from the survey that we have done, we have now around 64% of farmers willing to pay for water. And then we have the problem with allocation, with the cleaning of the canals. There are more now conditions for water to get to the tail enders. And well, we have at the bottom the attraction of young farmers. Well, I think this is a problem all over Africa. Most of our farmers are elders. But working with the local authorities and farmers, which are the owners of the plots on those irrigation schemes, we've managed to attract some young farmers to those irrigation schemes, to those plots that were not being exploited. Next slide, please. Please again. One more. This is just to show some pictures to show how the irrigation schemes now compared to the previous before the project started. Next slide. Next, please. Okay. Now the idea here was to share a little bit about the approach on outscaling. The tools, outscaling the project activities like the AIP and the mapping. So the idea is we have farmer-to-farmer learning, where we bring farmers from other irrigation scheme to a different irrigation scheme to explain about the advantages, disadvantages of the tools, what they think they find as the challenges. And also in most of those irrigation schemes, we also take the local authorities, the government responsible for agriculture on those districts to participate. And also inside within the irrigation scheme, because the tools are not enough, when the farmers go there to make the readings to understand what's happening with their plots, we also invite farmers around them to be there so they can see what's going on those plots, their neighbor plots. Next, please, next slide. This was just to show the other approach, which is coming from government to key stakeholders. So the idea is on those more bigger meetings, we're trying to invite NGOs, other public government entities to participate on those meetings, to understand a little bit the tools, to understand, for example, what they can do. One of the challenges that we have, for example, is importing the tools. So the idea is to bring those guys working on the importation to see what the way they can help to facilitate the process of importing these tools for the farmers. I think this is the last slide. Next, please. Oh, I have some more. This is some key messages from, let's say, summary. The idea was just to say farmers learning is important to improve yields. I think farmers understand better when they have another farmers trying to explain what's happening. And then the tools allow the farmer to save time and also money, which was very important. The combination of AIP, which are Agriculture Innovation Platform, and the tools is a potential to be used for decision making, because in those meetings, the idea is always to bring key stakeholders that can impact the lives of the farmers. And at the end, their scaling continues, is an ongoing process involving many irrigation stakeholders. Yeah, thank you. I hope I was fast.
You tried, but not very well. But thank you very much. I think your message on scaling out was very clear. The ability to attract farmers. Very impressed with the ability to pay, farmers being willing to pay for water. So without much ado, allow me to invite Christo. I thought he was presenting something on wine, but
Thank you very much. There you go. Is that my slide? Can I see the slide? Hi, Christus Spies. I am from Wine MS, this Chief Wine Taster. That's my official title. My secondary title is Chief Executive Officer, but we don't normally say anything about that. I'll try and keep to 5 minutes. It's, I think, enough time because I really do just want to get across, I think, key messages. I'm not going to talk too much about the detail of irrigation and so forth, but you can go to the next slide. What I do want to talk about is just experience that we have in the wine industry about just standardization and aligning industry and aligning our language so that we can better benchmark our producers from the ground up. As ourselves, we're a software provider, and you'd think that we sell software to a producer and to a winery to help that winery, but the reality is we want to look bigger than that. So when we do sell software, we try and align that as best as possible so that the industry can add value and create value from that. And we're lucky in the wine industry to have a body, Savas, that has aligned a lot of our data structures and languages so that cultivars are commonly known. Your rootstocks and irrigation systems has one language. And there's a massive lot of value in that. And with technology going out there is that when we want to extract data from something like that and benchmark our producers, it is proverbially measuring apples to apples. And it's fast and it's real time, and it allows us to really easily help our producers, as Wilson earlier said, to measure themselves against each other, and when they can measure each other, then we know that they can build and they can grow. So if you go to the next slide, if we look at what we measure, for us there's essentially 3 components of the measuring. The one is just measuring the assets, which in a farming community is block data. And a block data to me is everything just from the actual coordinates to the area that we're actually irrigating or irrigating they're producing from, the implements we use, those kind of assets, but also information on those assets, which is the analysis we get from there. And when we can align those, the communication around that, so in the industry, as I said, in the South African wine industry, what we do is, when we talk about Chenin Blanc, do you drink Chenin Blanc, white wine, yes? So when you talk about Chenin Blanc, there's Chenin Blanc and there's Steen. But in our system, Chenin Blanc is the kind of the root. So we can tell you exactly how much, how well a Chenin Blanc produces in the Breedekloof, Paul, whatever valley, because we have consistency in data. On that same level, we want to do this. We do the same on the measurement and investment side, cost, advice, stock, services, so that when you talk about a certain action, those actions are aligned. And when those actions are aligned, we can start measuring and compare, again, users to users. And these are not always the producers. We work very closely with the transformation unit, and we facilitate the emerging farmers, and I have people that consult with those emerging farmers that help measure that data, because our emerging farmers aren't always ready to measure themselves. But that allows our transformation units to look at a high level and compare all the different regions and how effective their funds and funds allocations would be. And you can't do that, obviously, if you don't have the last portion, which is measuring results. And that is measuring results through, obviously, firstly, your production data, which is the actual tonnage or yields that you get from those, and physically the income you do from there. Because if your platform or your blocks in your vineyards, in our case, or your maize crops aren't profitable, then long-term you're not sustainable. And if you're not sustainable, those communities can't grow. So those are my 2 core slides. I just want to just 2 things. Obviously, the enabling technology that's been around for so long is, the next slide is just, you need to be able to measure this and manage this that's accessible. So we use cloud technology to do that. Anything that's available through your browser, through your cell phone, through your iPad, where you can get access to these tools to measure your block data, to measure analysis, and then provide feedback. We refer to a multi-tenant environment, which means that when we do this, one producer can log in and have their own environment, another producer can log into the same system, and at an industry level or at a community level, you can look at and measure the data, obviously securely, from any level of that data, and allowed to add then further value-added services to those. So I want to leave you with a couple of last messages and key notes on that. How am I doing with time? Almost there? 2 minutes? It's critical that our language is common. Now, you saw that it's not Afrikaans or Xhosa or English. It's a common language of agriculture. And I think there's structures that need to be in place, like we did in the wine industry and all the other agricultural industries, so it's easy to compare apples to apples. Your access to that information needs to be accessible and measurable. And that measurable, again, is to be defined. That's just kind of the core of what we do as software architects, is building something that allows us to do that. And then integrated is not just integrated between farms, but it's also integrated on the vertical from the lower levels all the way to industry. and that language is integrated through that. And that gets to a point where you get big data, where you can actually assess data and start adding value by giving people back measurable results. And that's it. That's I think I've got a CV at the end just to show you. Background is we're a flagship wine company. We handle about 73% of all the industry data in South Africa. Introduced about 1,700 farmers. That's 5 minutes. Got it? 2 seconds. I'm almost there. But it's farm. We do anything from farm, olives, juice, and try and instill the same principles to give that kind of feedback and benchmarking data back to our producers. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christo. Sweet and short, and also very clear messages. Lastly, but not least, can we have Richard? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, well, I want to take you on a very short journey from how we went from what we thought was Do we stop the clock? Okay, on a very short journey from what we thought was building systems for monitoring water and have ended up really to be a system for governance. Next slide, please. And monitoring. This slide is somewhat redundant. I'm going to have to make 2 + 4 + 3 equal 4. I'm not sure how I'll do that, but let's go down 1. So you've already seen the technologies that we make. The VIA researches, designs, develops, manufactures sensors that measure soil water, nutrients, and salts. The output is color. The colors have meaning, and the colors are thresholds for action. And we manufacture them all in Africa for smallholder farmers. Next slide. And next slide. I think we just are going to have to run. I did want to spend some time here on this, how we got to where we are. I won't be able to do it as I expected, but we've spoken so much about the problem of scaling, which has to happen before we get to impact. And we have walked this journey in a very deep way. So quick, next one down. I started my work in 1991. That's two hours up the road, Laboa, if you remember a place called Laboa in the old days. And in the last 30-something years, I've worked on many schemes across Africa, and of course, and many other people have too. And thousands of papers have been written and libraries filled with donor reports. Keep going. But 10 years ago, the WRC looked for tried to do a kind of analysis of how far we'd got, and I think many of you would know the names at the bottom there. And one of the conclusions was that tertiary education responsible for the training of extension staff and managers, agricultural research institutions responsible for innovation in smallholder irrigation, and public extension responsible to guide and support farmer development have all fallen short of their mandates. And when I first read that, I thought, goodness me, well, it's not us, we're doing well. But of course it is us. We all know that almost nothing sticks. We know that. We've seen it. All of us have seen it. Our projects leave and things go back to how they were. Last year, sorry Bezel, but my friend Bezel Chizungu put up this paper at the International Commission for Irrigation and Drainage, Curse or Blessing, Are We Doomed to Succeed? And articulated the unclear ownerships and roles, the unsustainable plot sizes, the incomprehensible participatory approaches, and the unbearable cycles of failure and rehabilitation. And I applaud him for his honesty, because someone needed to say it so that we can do things very differently. Very differently. Next slide. I'd be polite if I had more time. Next slide. CADAP. Who said we don't know CADAP? Okay. We got into this idea of people-centered learning, building technology with people at the center, Not building technology for scientists, building them for the people who use them. And I just want to take you through a very, very quick timeline here of what is by far the craziest project of my career. We commissioned, when people say, what is the VIA, by the way, it's just a project, just like all of yours. It's just a project, okay? But after a few years, people saw what was happening and they said, we want some of these things. And we thought, well, why should I give them to you? I mean, I make them in the weekends anyway. I mean, I haven't got any for you. But then we thought, look, you know, lots of people want them. There's a wave to surf here. Let's surf it. Because, like, you know, everything works in our own projects. I mean, we mark our own homework. But if it works in other people's projects, then maybe, just maybe, we're onto something. Well, within 3 years, we were in 20 countries. We were contracted to work in 4. We were contracted to produce a few thousand sensors. We've gone to tens of thousands. We were contract and thousands of users and user groups. And so last year we got to a not-for-profit company. And I just want to tell you that that much of the impediment for scaling sits with us, not them, us, in our systems and in our preparedness to say it's someone else's job. I'm not going to get to governance because I have got a short time, but I will say something about learning. We started with what we thought was just monitoring. But when we went to the field and spoke to the farmers, there was a much richer conversation going on there. Monitoring is just optimizing what you're doing, which might be the wrong thing. Learning is seeing that what you can do in your constraints that is different. And you can read those comments as well as I. Down one. I think that shot comes from Malawi. Okay, so, and if you listen to what these women are saying, I think these were in Tanzania, I must apply less fertilizer more often. How do you get rid of salinity? Manure stays longer in the soil. These are lessons that were learned hard learned themselves through monitoring, through talking to each other, through comparing what they were getting with each other. Okay, perhaps I won't get to governance. I'll just end by saying that the water, it's fantastic to see the scaling in the seed industry, but water is market failure everywhere you look. And where you're not looking at water failure, market failure, you're looking at poverty. And even the farmers say this is the government's problem. And we subsidize water, and we subsidize concrete, and we subsidize drip kits, and we subsidize fertilizer, and we subsidize electricity. But I think what we should subsidize, if we're going to subsidize anything, is information. Because if you subsidize information, you unlock creativity. And I want to tell you how much there is down there, how much creativity there is down there, how much people want to change. And when people have information, and when they can see that things can be done better, and when they can see that cooperating is better than grabbing the water that you can just because you're closest, then you've got the beginnings of governance of water.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying it as it is. I think, like you're saying, sometimes we need to be very honest with ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 10 minutes for questions and reflections. If you're asking a question, be straight to the point and direct it to any one of these gentlemen. I don't like the panel very much because it is all male dominated. My sister and then my brother from. This way. Solid.
also a question and also some critical reflection on what we do at the Commission. As we listened in the morning, you had Dr. Mura saying that we don't even know. But we formulate policies or we formulate them. And we do them for implementers like you, researchers like you. And I have noted that maybe some of our policies are not known, and I don't know who to blame. So one of those policies is maybe the guidelines, the continental guidelines on biotech that were endorsed in February 2022. And those guidelines were meant to kind of ease the tension that was around the so-called model that practitioners were saying the precautionary principle and practice was killing the whole effort on biotech. Now, there's a new conversation going on saying, can we review that model and take it back to the policymakers, to the ministers and the presidents and say this thing is not working because all the voices from the field. And the voices from the field, I've had them here. Because sometimes if they ask me, they put me on a corner after I've presented a report and they tell me which ones are those, I don't know. But I've had Sylvester, I've had the AATF, they are very clear, and what they are saying is a lesson that must be learned, and we learn from it by reviewing the model, the aspects that are not working. And even when we are developing the guidelines on biotech, the expert we used was cornered by civil society, punching him left, right, and center, and good enough those who were during the COVID days were with Zoom. Maybe they would have shot him. Because for them, they have voices, they can be rowdy, I don't know who pays them to write those messages. And in this room, I've had the science, and I've seen that we also have the evidence that we can provide options, informed options, and we get out of this hunger situation that we are always in. The voice of Dr. Sylvester made me think that maybe this evening I should look for him to be our champion on biotech. Not that I'm a stakeholder in terms of, like I'm a shareholder, but I coordinate the African Seed and Biotechnology Program. And that was endorsed in 2007. But we've been fearing to touch the area of biotechnology methodologies and applications because we fear these people, we don't know where they descend from. It's like when you talk about gay and what they will descend on you and you don't know what will happen. So is there a way now from this room we can decide that we shall also write policy briefs, we shall inform policy makers, move this research of viewers to extension to the boardroom in the commission at in Ethiopia, say that you people, look here, we are listening to those people who are instructing us. They want to keep us hungry, and maybe they want to sell this, whoever funds them. We can write our own narrative, and we can sell our own biotechnologies and flourish. We can live together in the same room. And also, I want to mention about someone who talked about fertilizer and soil health. We have this fertilizer summit coming on in June in Dhaka Senate. This room, what information will come there to inform that summit so that the decisions are also conducive to soil health, but also conducive to the private sector that must sell their fertilizer. Thank you.
Thank you. I think with the time, I'm only going to take two more questions, and then I can allow the panelists to respond to that and also make concluding remarks. And then Uganda.
Thank you very much. In fact,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm very proud to see the result from Tanzania and Mozambique. And now we are talking about actions and about technology. And I myself, I believe 100% this is what we need, because this is a very simple tool. And what I saw today, it is a great achievement to have this kind of application with farmers. And I wonder what is the main role here for the government in this application, because now we are looking for upscaling. for the government, because I see there are many benefits we could realize. And it is very simple to convince even decision makers, because we have a good result. Now we see a quantitative result. It is very clear what is different before and after, and it is very clear. I wonder also for Tanzania. I saw the awareness program. The number is too less, 100, because the application it was for 250, but this number is too low because we have a good result to disseminate, to increase the awareness at different levels. And myself, I invite Dr. Richard and his team to represent this kind of result in our next African Young Professional Forum under the platform of Cairo Water Week, because it is a good time to show this result for all. And I am sure that we can build a good future based on this available result. Thank you.
Thank you. Uganda, oh, yes. So you be the last one. But first, Uganda here. There's another one?
Yeah, Vivian. I think she was the first. Sorry.
Vivian.
Yeah.
Okay. No, you. It was tiring. All right. No, she's not saying anything. We'll come together. Maybe you can start with it.
Thank you very much. Yes, to introduce myself, I'm Vivian Kazi. I'm a senior researcher working with the Economic and Social Research Foundation, ESRF, which is based in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. I'm also heading the Strategic Research and Publications Department at the Institute. And for this work, I'm FANAPAN Node Coordinator from Tanzania side. We were highly involved with this project, especially on the policy engagement. We worked closely with Dr. Makarios and Aldo University.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to contribute to what he has presented, Dr. Makarios, especially on the use of the tool, especially on the use of the simple soil moisture monitoring tool in the specific regions in Tanzania. We managed to do the presentation of this work, and I remember it was in 2019, and the guest of honor was the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Agriculture. He was very much interested on the findings of this project. And he was actually he was asking us how he can get a number of those tools so that we can spill it over to other regions. We have 26 regions, and it was piloted in some few regions. The issue that we realized is that the tool itself is very expensive because you need to import from South Africa. The tool itself was US dollars 712. But in order to import to get it to Tanzania, you pay double the price, US dollar 1,570, something like that. And so, for rands, yes. So it was because of that different taxes. So we thought that maybe there is a need to do some more policy engagement instead of doing those policy dialogues alone. And we thought that because it touches across the fiscal policies of the country, and maybe it applies also in some other regions, countries like Mozambique, it's important to do engagement maybe at the parliamentary level, where you have various members of parliament who can advocate for policy change, especially when it comes to different tools that can assist small farmers if you import to reduce kind of importation taxes, so that many smallholder farmers can get access. So the issue is not accessibility, the issue is affordability of those tools. Thank you.
Much. My name is Mary Jane Taela Chimuka. I am from Agricultural Research Council. I thank you for such a nice talk and tools. And I was listening to the speaker speaking about fertilizer, and I'm just wondering, since it's a climate smart agriculture, have we ever looked at replacing the fertilizer with organic fertilizer. For example, we are doing some studies at ARC where we are using digestate, which is a biofertilizer, and where it can replace. I think all of us have seen how fertilizer has really increased and is increasing, and I think it will be a good idea for the policy, because one of the problems that we are having is that digestate need to be proved that it's safe, and also that it can be used, and there are policies that need to be in place. So this is I think it's a nice platform, and I would like us to start to think about it when we go home to replace this natural fertilizer, which is expensive and is chemical and it's very dangerous by digestate. So I'm blowing my vuvuzela. If anybody knows what is a vuvuzela, 2010, remember? I'm blowing that, and I say, let's think of digestate and biofertilizer and replacing chemical fertilizer. Thank you very much.
The last question is coming from here, and then we allow our panelists to make their final remarks, plus responding to the questions of our talks.
Thank you so much, the presenters. My name is Susie Munialo, and I'm a postdoc research fellow with Arua Center of Excellence in Sustainable Food Systems. And I've been listening to the presentation. They're very exciting. And my question is maybe a concern to Dr. Sylvester. I was just sitting here and wondering, as the African continent, have we done enough to realize the potential we have in terms of food production before we think about the GMOs? I'm talking from the perspective of when you look at the African continent, within the different regions, we have indigenous Africa's crops, but you haven't utilized these crops to their full potential. We haven't even realized the production of these crops or the commercialization of these crops, but these crops are of high value in terms of the macro and micronutrient content. And I was also happy to hear that the African Union has also put some money in projects that look at climate resilient food systems. And is there an opportunity that you can bring these crops into their full potential in terms of production and commercialization, so that we can even transform the African food systems? And just before thinking about the GMOs, I stand to be corrected though. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our panelists, you have heard the questions, so you'll be also making your last remarks. I'll start with Dr. Nangayo. 1 minute.
1 minute. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that challenges at farm level in many smallholder farms, the majority in Africa, are well known. And they beg for not witchcraft or anything, they beg for scientific, proven solutions through tools and technologies. And technologies need to be regulated, and we were not saying GM technology does not need regulation. They need to be regulated in a scientifically sound and socially responsible manner. I will finish off by saying that at one time, some governments thought they would regulate biotechnology or GM technology by imposing moratorium. Brazil did this about 20 years ago, and the farmers in Brazil, talking to their farmers in Argentina, they realized there was very high-yielding GM soybean in Argentina. So the farmers did not bother about the government. They crossed the border, picked the seed, and started growing. Then Brazil later realized that although they have a moratorium, about 30% of their soybean is GM after all. So they quickly moved in now to regulate responsibly, and Brazil is the second GM producing country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So on the benefit of the tools to the government, so what we have demonstrated here is the benefit which is direct to the farmers. But these have benefited too, to government, but also other investors, particularly when you consider, smallholder schemes in our region. It is one of a very strategic area for food security, but also poverty reduction. But they use the same water which a number of sectors compete. And for example, for the case of Tanzania, you have a number of irrigation which is upstream, the ecosystem, but also the hydropower. So that means the demonstration of the value of this is very important to entice or encourage other sectors also to support and invest. And for the case of the number, a small number, so these are the direct, that we had the direct contact. But as you have heard, we had a number of policy dialogue, so we do not include all the, maybe the stakeholders and people who actually heard about these tools, and this should be higher than 250. I think the other issue, Vivian has said about the affordability, which is true. And for this, I think we have tried to engage. I think the challenge we had in Tanzania, one was, every time the leaders of either the minister or the permanent secretary changes. So the same for the National Irrigation Commission, which we used to work closely until recently when they have appointed. So the National Irrigation Commission now has a director, but also the board. But we were able last year to have these tools exempted from value-added tax. So that means that encourages, of course, the government cannot do business on the tools. It's supposed to provide policy and incentive and attractions for people who are bringing the tools and distributing to do it, without much difficulties. Yes. Yeah. So we think, still we need to continue to engage, and it's not you would not say it's a straight way of doing things, but it's a process that requires further engagement.
Thank you very much, Madam. I can volunteer to be ambassador for this technology for AU. I accept that because I've been going to different parts of the world to talk about this technology. It's time for Africa to wake up. I will continue to say it when I have any opportunity, because what is happening is intentions to prevent us from taking this technology. If we have time, I can explain why this intention is. For example, just to get back to the lady on indigenous crop, cowpea is the first crop in Africa, indigenous to Africa, that has been genetically modified in the world, led by AATF. Farmers used to spray 8 times minimum to control a pest. But with the genetically modified, they spray 2 times. What happened to their cost of production? Gone down, isn't it? Then what happens to the chemical industry providing that chemical they are using? Are they going to be happy? No. Answer me. Are they going to be happy? They will not be happy. And if they are not happy, what will they do? They will use us, we Africans, to fight against ourselves. And that is what is killing us. So, to you, let's go back to indigenous crop. You only go to look for solution when there is a problem you can't solve through conventional method. Your indigenous crop, what are their yield? We've been growing maize, recycling seed that my forefathers grew. Our yield have remained 1 ton per hectare. What is the yield of farmers in South Africa? is almost 6 tons or more. Should we continue to stay where we are, or we should embrace technology? This is what we are talking about. Thank you.
All right. That's what
I'm gonna sit, if that's okay. Firstly, I just want to say I'm really honored to be with all the rest of the panelists. It's lovely to see the passion in their subject matters, and it really inspires to see that people are really impactful out there and passionate about the solutions they want to bring there. And it encourages me to work harder on what we do, and that is software that helps that. And I just want to reiterate what I said in my presentation, is that we can measure a lot of inputs and get value out of those inputs, but we need to look at this in a structured, common language type of model long term, so that we can just not measure inputs, but measure outputs and be able to benchmark our various industries with each other. And that, I think, when we look at policy and frameworks, we have to start looking at those structures so that it can scale to levels that can have a bigger and bigger impact. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stand. Well, few words. The tools, I'm going to focus on the tools, okay? The tools are very important for the government, especially for our government. Our government has been investing in building irrigation scheme for a long time, around $1 to $5 million just for one irrigation scheme. So having these tools, it's a way to guarantee that those systems become sustainable. And the farmers also find a way, for example, to save water, save time, and do other things besides just irrigations. Thank you.
Well, in my minute, I think I will respond to this issue of cost. There is this gigantic disconnect where the papers are written and show values of hundreds and thousands of dollars, whatever, generated at different levels through monitoring or better decisions, better whatever thing, all the other benefits you've heard about today. But nothing else happens. It stops there. I have some thoughts why. Come to booth 8, I might tell you. But just to put a cat amongst the pigeons, we are selling sensors now in Malawi. They are $3 each in Malawi because we've had the best partnerships there. It's nowhere near that in any other place.
Thank you so much. Join me in thanking my panel. I think you can continue the conversation over break, but this was extremely very helpful. Now, I've learned quite a lot, but also I hope we can continue sharing on biotechnology, but also on other technologies that we're doing on water management. Okay, so I'm being told that our break will only be 15 minutes, I guess because we were able to extend our time here. So any choice that we have has consequences, and that is the consequence. But I think it's a good consequence. Thank you very much.